The night a mother and daughter were killed in Norfolk, prosecutors say the person accused of shooting Alicia Hereford and her daughter Morgan Bazemore had an off-and-on relationship with Bazemore for years. Eugene Daniels shares what happened today inside the Norfolk courtroom.
One woman testified that she saw people leaving the scene and even captured video on her car's dash cam.
Support us by subscribing to this channel. Hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss our latest videos.
It was a quiet night in Norfolk, Virginia, until a desperate cry for help shattered the stillness. What followed was a crime so savage, so gut-wrenching, that it sent shockwaves through an entire community. In a dimly lit parking lot, beneath the flicker of streetlights, two lifeless bodies lay in a pool of blood. Alicia Hereford, a 52-year-old retired social worker, and her 23-year-old daughter, Morgan Bazemore. Alicia, known for her unyielding compassion, and Morgan, a vibrant young woman just stepping into her future, were executed in cold blood. Their deaths were brutal, their loss incomprehensible. But the nightmare didn't end there. As investigators pieced together the clues, the case took an even darker turn, one that would leave the victim's family and the entire community crying out for justice. A suspect surfaced, a plea deal was struck, and just like that, justice slipped through the cracks. Why were these women targeted? What sinister truths lie behind the $250,000 in cash hidden in their car? And how did the man accused of these horrific murders escape with just 8 years behind bars? This isn't just a story about murder. It's a chilling mystery riddled with unanswered questions, courtroom betrayals, and haunting secrets. Stay with us as we pull back the curtain on one of Norfolk's most shocking true crime cases. You'll want to see this one through to the end, because nothing is as it seems. Norfolk, Virginia is a city known for its historic charm and vibrant community, but beneath its coastal beauty lies a darker reality. Rising gun violence has cast a long shadow over its neighborhoods, leaving residents on edge and families grieving. On the night of March 12, 2021, that darkness found its way to the Hunter Square apartments. It was here, under the pale glow of flickering streetlights, that Alicia Hereford and her daughter Morgan Bazemore faced their final moments. The bond they shared was unbreakable. A mother-daughter duo who were each other's rock. Alicia, a retired social worker, had dedicated her life to helping others, while Morgan, just 23 years old, was following her own path of hard work and resilience. Friends described them as inseparable, always lifting each other up through life's challenges. But that night, Alicia's protective instincts would lead her into the jaws of a nightmare. Morgan's voice broke through the silence, a frantic phone call to her mother. She was in danger. Her boyfriend, Kenyatta Jones, had become violent. Without hesitation, Alicia rushed to the scene, her only thought to protect her child. But what awaited her at Hunter Square was chaos. Gunshots shattered the night. Neighbors, startled from their routines, would later recount the chilling sound of bullets ripping through the air. Moments later, two lifeless bodies lay crumpled in the dim parking lot. Morgan had been shot twice, once in the torso and once fatally in the head. Alicia suffered even more brutality, with 3 gunshot wounds to her chest and back. The precision of the attack spoke volumes about the intent behind it. Shell casings littered the ground, each one a silent witness to the rage and violence that unfolded. Amid the chaos, a white car sped away, leaving behind only grief and unanswered questions. Why would Kenyatta Jones, a man Morgan had once cared for, turn on her so viciously? What could drive someone to such unimaginable brutality? But as investigators combed through the crime scene and interviewed witnesses, the case only grew murkier. A chilling discovery inside Alicia's car added another layer of intrigue. $250,000 in cash tucked away in the trunk, and $21,100 in counterfeit bills in the back seat. What was this money doing there? Was it connected to the murders? Or an entirely separate mystery? And then there was the gun in Morgan's purse. Was it a sign she had sensed danger, or a clue that something darker was at play? These details painted a picture of a case far more complex than a simple domestic dispute. What secrets were Alicia and Morgan carrying, and how far would someone go to bury them? Stay with us as we delve deeper into the web of betrayal, unanswered questions, and devastating loss that has left a family shattered and a community reeling. This is a story where every answer only seems to lead to more haunting questions. As investigators began piecing together the events of that fateful night, one name stood out: Kenyatta Jones. a 29-year-old man who had been in an on-and-off relationship with Morgan Bazemore. On the surface, they seemed like an ordinary couple. Frequent social media posts painted a picture of love and normalcy. But those who knew them saw another side, a relationship marked by tension, arguments, and emotional turmoil, a relationship that tragically would end in bloodshed. Jones wasn't a stranger to the residents of Hunter Square Apartments. He lived there with his mother, blending into the fabric of the neighborhood. But on the night of March 12, 2021, he became the prime suspect in a double homicide that would haunt Norfolk for years to come. Eyewitness accounts placed Jones at the scene. A neighbor and her daughter, startled by the sound of gunfire, described seeing Jones fleeing the parking lot. A white car, later identified as his, was caught on dash cam footage speeding away from the chaos. It seemed like an open and shut case. But as detectives dug deeper, the waters became murky. The first complication? The witnesses. While one neighbor's testimony linked Jones to the scene, other accounts conflicted. Some neighbors claimed to hear arguing, others only gunshots. Details about what happened in those critical moments before the murders were vague, fragmented, and at times contradictory. And then there were those who refused to talk at all. Fear of retaliation, distrust of the justice system, or personal reasons left investigators without key pieces of the puzzle. Witness silence, a recurring theme in Norfolk's gun violence cases, left a gaping hole in the prosecution's case. Detectives also faced the daunting task of unraveling the motive. Why would Jones kill the woman he had shared so much of his life with? Why target her mother, a retired social worker with no known enemies? The answers weren't forthcoming. There were no reports of a heated argument that night, no history of restraining orders, no immediate signs of what could push someone to commit such a heinous act. But then came the discovery that changed everything. Inside Alicia Hereford's car, investigators uncovered a staggering $250,000 in cash hidden in the trunk. This wasn't a casual stash. It was neatly packed, as though meant for something significant. Alongside it, $21,100 in counterfeit bills sat in the back seat. And if that wasn't enough to raise eyebrows, investigators also found a gun in Morgan's purse. The moment they issued the call for investigation, but the presence of these items only raised more questions than answers. Was the cash connected to Alicia's life savings, as her family later claimed, or did it point to something darker, perhaps an illicit operation that no one had known about? And what about the counterfeit bills? Were Alicia and Morgan unwittingly caught up in something far beyond their control, or were they targeted because of the money? The investigation hit a wall. With limited cooperation from witnesses and no direct evidence tying Jones to the motive, prosecutors faced an uphill battle. The Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fatihi, later revealed the stark reality. Without key witnesses willing to testify, securing a conviction for second-degree murder or even first-degree murder was nearly impossible. And so a plea deal was struck. Kenyatta Jones pleaded guilty to 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter, a far cry from the original charges. For Alicia and Morgan's grieving family, this plea deal was nothing short of a slap in the face. In court, family members poured out their anguish, their words laced with pain and frustration. Monica Bazemore, Morgan's aunt, voiced what so many were thinking. There are criminals who get more time for drugs. How do you get just 8 years total for 2 beautiful souls? The victim's father, Harvey Hereford, expressed his heartbreak, accusing the legal system of failing his family. The Commonwealth that she served made no effort to prosecute her murder, he said, referring to Alicia's years of dedication as a social worker. For the family, the 8-year sentence wasn't just an insult, it was a profound betrayal. The prosecutors argued they had no choice. Without eyewitnesses willing to testify, the case risked being dismissed entirely. Jones could have walked away with no consequences. It pained me to make the plea offer, Fatihi admitted, but I could not permit Mr. Jones to walk free with no accountability. Still, the decision left a bitter taste. It highlighted a critical issue within the justice system, the lack of a witness protection program. Without assurances of safety, witnesses often stayed silent, leaving cases like this one to fall apart. Was the plea deal a necessary compromise, or a failure of the system to deliver true justice? And then there's the looming question: if the witnesses had spoken up, could Alicia and Morgan's family have seen Jones face a lifetime behind bars? Or were there deeper forces at play? Secrets surrounding the cash, the counterfeit bills, and the gun that made the truth too dangerous to bring to light. The case was far from over. Every piece of evidence seemed to whisper a chilling possibility that the full truth had yet to be uncovered. The courtroom was packed. Every corner seemed to hum with tension as family members, reporters, and onlookers gathered to witness the sentencing of Kenyatta Jones. For Alicia Hereford's family, this was supposed to be a moment of justice, a moment to honor the lives of a devoted mother and her bright, ambitious daughter. But what they got instead was heartbreak. When the sentence was read aloud, 8 years for 2 counts of voluntary manslaughter, the room fell into a stunned silence. 8 years. 4 years for each life. It was a number that hung in the air like a bitter reminder of a system they believed had failed them. The pain etched across the faces of Alicia's loved ones told a story all its own. In their eyes, this wasn't justice, it was a betrayal. Monica Bazmore, Morgan's aunt, rose to speak. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of her family's grief. "There are criminals who get more time for drugs," she said, her words cutting through the stillness like a blade. "How do you get just 8 years total for 2 beautiful souls?" She looked toward the defendant, a man who had once been part of her niece's life, now the source of her family's unimaginable pain. Alicia's husband, Harvey Hereford, had his own words for the court. His voice, laced with anguish, accused the Commonwealth's attorney of failing the woman who had spent her life serving others. "The Commonwealth that she served made no effort to prosecute her murder," he said. For Harvey, this wasn't just a legal failing, it was deeply personal. His wife and daughter were gone, and the man responsible, in his eyes, would walk free far too soon. But while the family's words carried raw emotion, the prosecutors offered a stark defense of their decision. Ramin Fatehi, Norfolk's Commonwealth's attorney, stood firm. He explained that the plea deal wasn't made out of apathy but necessity. Key witnesses, he revealed, had either refused to testify or disappeared altogether. Without their cooperation, the case would likely have been dismissed entirely. "It pained me to make the plea offer in this case," Fatehi stated, his tone measured but resolute. "Without the cooperation of the key eyewitnesses, the alternative was very likely to be a dismissal for lack of evidence. I could not permit Mr. Jones to walk free with no consequences." The courtroom remained divided. Some saw the plea deal as a necessary compromise, a way to ensure Kenyatta Jones faced some accountability, however limited. But for Alicia and Morgan's family, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The justice they had hoped for felt incomplete, hollow, and unsatisfying. This case, however, wasn't just about one man's actions. It exposed a glaring issue within the justice system, an issue that would haunt this family long after the sentencing was over. The absence of a witness protection program left key individuals too afraid to come forward, a silence that tilted the scales of justice in ways no one could ignore. Without witnesses, the system faltered, and the victim's family bore the brunt of that failure. But even as the courtroom drama unfolded, the case's deeper mysteries loomed large. What about the $250,000 in cash found in Alicia's car? The family had claimed it was her life savings, meant to secure their future. Yet no clear documentation had emerged to confirm this. And then there were the counterfeit bills, $21,100, stacked neatly in the back seat. What were they doing there? Were Alicia and Morgan involved in something illegal, or were they victims of a larger, more sinister scheme? Every detail seemed to raise more questions than answers. How did the money tie into the murders? Was it a motive, a coincidence, or something far more complicated? And what about the gun found in Morgan's purse? Did she know her life was in danger? Was she planning to defend herself, or had she been caught off guard by the person she thought she could trust? For the family, these unanswered questions added insult to injury. Not only were they left grieving the loss of 2 beloved women, but they were also grappling with a legal and emotional quagmire that seemed impossible to untangle. And as the media speculated about the cash, the counterfeit bills, and the plea deal, one truth became painfully clear. This story was far from over. The shock of the plea deal reverberated far beyond the courtroom walls. For those following the case, it felt as though justice had been bargained away. But as the media frenzy began to die down, the true complexity of the story started to emerge, a web of secrets and unanswered questions that would continue to haunt both the victim's family and the investigators tasked with solving the case. At the center of this tangled mystery was the $250,000 in cash discovered in Alicia Hereford's car. Neatly packed in the trunk, the money seemed out of place for a retired social worker known for her modest lifestyle. Adding to the intrigue were the $21,100 in counterfeit bills stacked in the back seat. This discovery raised an unsettling question. Was this a simple case of domestic violence, or was there a deeper, more sinister motive behind the murders? Alicia's family was quick to claim the money as her life savings. They insisted it was earned through years of hard work and careful planning. Yet, there was no clear documentation to confirm their story, and the presence of counterfeit bills cast a long shadow over their claims. The police, meanwhile, were tight-lipped. keeping the money in custody as part of the ongoing investigation. The funds will remain with the Norfolk Police Department's evidence unit until the rightful owner is determined, a city spokesperson said. But who exactly could prove ownership? And why hadn't this detail been resolved even months after the crime? The unanswered questions surrounding the money fueled speculation. Was Alicia involved in something illegal, a hidden side of her life that no one knew about? Or was she, like so many others, an unwitting victim of circumstances beyond her control? And then there was Morgan's gun discovered inside her purse. Had she carried it for protection, sensing danger in her volatile relationship with Kenyatta Jones? Or was the firearm an ominous clue pointing to a larger, more complex story? Adding another layer to the mystery was the behavior of Kenyatta Jones himself. After the murders, he didn't run far. Just days later, he walked into a police station and turned himself in, seemingly without a struggle. But his surrender didn't come with answers. Instead, it raised more questions. Why had he decided to come forward? Was it guilt, or was he hoping to control the narrative? And what about the inconsistencies in witness testimonies? Some neighbors claimed to have seen Jones fleeing the scene, while others were less certain, their recollections muddled by the chaos of the night. Investigators tried to piece it all together, but their efforts were hampered at every turn. Key witnesses refused to cooperate, either out of fear or distrust of the system. Critical evidence, like the dash cam footage that captured a white car speeding away, was circumstantial at best. And without a clear motive, the case against Jones felt like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Meanwhile, the family's grief was compounded by another battle, a legal fight over the money found in Alicia's car. Both her husband, Harvey Hereford, and her surviving son, Marvin Bazemore, came forward claiming ownership of the cash. Harvey argued that the money belonged to Alicia's estate, a part of her life savings intended to secure their family's future. Marvin, on the other hand, claimed it was his inheritance. The fight became so heated that lawsuits were filed, dragging the tragedy even further into the public eye. But the family's focus wasn't just on the money. They wanted answers. Why had Alicia and Morgan been targeted? What role, if any, did the cash and counterfeit bills play in their deaths? And most of all, why had the justice system allowed the man responsible to walk away with a sentence they felt was far too lenient? The story of Alicia Hereford and Morgan Bazemore became more than just a case file. It was a symbol of a system stretched thin, a community grappling with rising violence, and a family torn apart not just by loss but by lingering doubts. Each new revelation seemed to deepen the mystery. Was this truly a case of domestic violence turned deadly, or was it something far more? And what about the 8 years Kenyatta Jones was sentenced to serve? For the family, it wasn't nearly enough. 4 years for each life, Monica Bazemore had said, her voice heavy with disbelief. How is that justice? The community echoed her sentiment, with many questioning whether the justice system had failed Alicia and Morgan. Others pointed to the lack of a witness protection program, a critical flaw that left key individuals too afraid to testify. Could their cooperation have led to a harsher sentence? Or was the plea deal inevitable in a case where so much remained shrouded in doubt? As the questions piled up, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary case. It was a labyrinth of secrets, unanswered questions, and a family's relentless fight for justice. The discovery of $250,000 in cash and $21,100 in counterfeit bills inside Alicia Hereford's car raised more questions than answers. But for Alicia's family, one thing was clear. This money was no coincidence. It was the thread that tied their loved ones to a dark and complicated story, one that investigators were only beginning to unravel. While Alicia had retired from her career as a social worker, she was far from idle. She owned several rental properties across Virginia, a business she managed with precision and care. Her family described her as meticulous when it came to her finances. So, why was so much cash stashed in her car? And why were counterfeit bills mixed in? These questions weren't just theoretical, they tore through the family, adding a layer of confusion and suspicion to an already unbearable tragedy. Alicia's son, Marvin Bazemore, and her husband, Harvey Hereford, were thrust into a bitter legal battle over the money's ownership. Harvey insisted the cash was part of Alicia's estate, her hard-earned savings meant to secure their future. Marvin, however, claimed it was his inheritance, a gift from his mother before her untimely death. The lawsuit only deepened the family's wounds, turning their shared grief into a battleground. But the money wasn't the only source of tension. Investigators, too, were grappling with its implications. Was the cash connected to Alicia's property business, or did it suggest something more illicit? And what about the counterfeit bills? Were they a clue pointing to a larger criminal network, or were they a red herring in a case already overflowing with mysteries? One theory began to take shape. a chilling possibility that the murders of Alicia and Morgan weren't random acts of domestic violence but premeditated crimes tied to the money. Could someone have targeted Alicia for her financial success? Was there a deal gone wrong, or had someone within her circle betrayed her? These questions lingered, their answers as elusive as the truth itself. And then there was Morgan Bazemore, a young woman just starting her life. Morgan was described by friends as caring, driven, and deeply loyal. She worked multiple jobs to support herself, including stints at CVS Corporate and Walmart, and she always carried a sense of responsibility beyond her years. But beneath her vibrant exterior was a young woman caught in a tumultuous relationship. Morgan's relationship with Kenya Jones was, by all accounts, rocky. They fought often, their arguments sometimes spilling into public view. But despite their ups and downs, Morgan remained tied to him, perhaps out of love, perhaps out of fear. On the night of her death, Morgan carried a gun in her purse. Was it a silent cry for help, a sign that she knew danger was looming? Or was it something else entirely? For Alicia, her daughter's safety had always been paramount. That night, when Morgan called in a panic, Alicia didn't hesitate. She rushed to the Hunter Square apartments, driven by instinct and love. But when she arrived, it was too late. The violence had already begun, and by the time the dust settled, both mother and daughter lay lifeless in the parking lot. The aftermath was a scene of chaos. Shell casings littered the ground and neighbors huddled behind curtains, too afraid to intervene. Dashcam footage, later recovered, showed a white car speeding away from the scene, a car linked to Kenyatta Jones. Witnesses described hearing gunshots and seeing Jones flee, but their accounts were fragmented and inconsistent. Some were too afraid to testify. Others disappeared entirely. The silence surrounding the case only deepened its mysteries. As investigators pieced together the evidence, they hit a wall. Without reliable witnesses, the case against Jones began to crumble. And while his decision to turn himself in seemed like an admission of guilt, it wasn't enough to secure a conviction. The plea deal, though painful for the victim's family, was the only way to ensure Jones faced some accountability. But was it justice? For Alicia and Morgan's loved ones, the answer was a resounding no. Even with the plea deal, the lingering questions refused to fade. What drove Jones to such violence? Was it jealousy, rage, or something more sinister? And how did the money in Alicia's car tie into the events of that night? Each new revelation seemed to pull the case further into a web of intrigue, leaving everyone involved grasping for answers. The family's grief was compounded by the public scrutiny surrounding the case. Social media lit up with speculation, theories, and accusations. Some questioned the family's claims about the money. Others pointed fingers at law enforcement, accusing them of failing to protect Alicia and Morgan. Amid the noise, one truth remained. The full story of what happened that night had yet to be told. As we dig deeper into this chilling case, we'll explore the unanswered questions that continue to haunt Alicia and Morgan's family. Was justice truly served, or was the system itself complicit in their tragedy? And what role did the money, the counterfeit bills, and the gun play in this devastating story? Stay with us as we uncover more layers of a case that refuses to let go. The plea deal that sentenced Kenyatta Jones to just 8 years for the deaths of Alicia Herford and Morgan Bazemore wasn't just a legal decision, it was a turning point. For the victim's family, it marked the beginning of a fight not just for justice, but for truth. And for the community of Norfolk, it cast a spotlight on the city's growing struggles with violence, witness silence, and systemic shortcomings. In the weeks following the sentencing, the family's heartbreak turned to outrage. The courtroom testimonies, raw with emotion, had painted a picture of 2 lives lost far too soon. Alicia was more than a retired social worker. She was a pillar of strength, a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others. Morgan, at just 23, was a beacon of promise, a young woman whose laughter and drive had touched everyone around her. Together, they represented the best of what a family could be. Their loss left a void that nothing could fill. For the victims' loved ones, the question wasn't just how this tragedy happened, but why it had been allowed to happen at all. The plea deal, while ensuring some level of accountability, felt like a cruel compromise. It wasn't just about the short sentence, it was about the unanswered questions that haunted every aspect of the case. Take, for instance, the witnesses. 4 individuals had been identified as key to the investigation. These were people who had seen or heard critical details about the night of March 12, 2021, and yet, when the time came to testify, they vanished. Some refused outright, citing fear for their safety. Others simply couldn't be located. Their absence left a gaping hole in the prosecution's case, a hole that the Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fatehi, later admitted was impossible to fill. "It pained me to make the plea offer in this case," Fatehi said in a public statement. But without the cooperation of key eyewitnesses, the alternative was very likely to be a dismissal for lack of evidence. His words, though candid, offered little solace to a grieving family. For them, it felt as though the system had chosen convenience over justice. This wasn't the first time witness silence had hindered a case in Norfolk. The city's rising gun violence had created a culture of fear where speaking out often came with real and deadly consequences. Without a formal witness protection program, those brave enough to come forward often found themselves vulnerable. It was a systemic flaw that prosecutors couldn't ignore, and one that, in cases like this, tipped the scales of justice in devastating ways. But the witnesses weren't the only missing piece. The $250,000 in cash and the counterfeit bills found in Alicia's car remained a central mystery. Forensic investigators had scoured the evidence, but no definitive answers emerged. Was the money tied to a larger criminal operation, or was it, as the family claimed, simply part of Alicia's life savings? And if so, why had she chosen to keep it in her car instead of a safer place? The counterfeit bills added another layer of complexity. Counterfeiting is rarely an isolated crime. It often points to organized networks operating beneath the surface. Yet no connections were found between the money and any known criminal activity. This left investigators and the public with a nagging question. Was the cash a motive for the murders, or was it merely a coincidence? And then there was Morgan's gun. A small but significant detail, it raised unsettling questions about her state of mind leading up to the tragedy. Had she been carrying it for protection, aware that her relationship with Jones had taken a dangerous turn? Or was the gun an indication of something more? The possibilities were endless, and the lack of clear answers only fueled speculation. For the victim's family, the speculation was its own form of torment. Social media buzzed with theories, some sympathetic, others accusatory. Was Alicia involved in something illegal? Had Morgan known more than she let on? Or was this all an elaborate attempt to shift the blame away from the one person who had confessed to the crime? As the family wrestled with these questions, they found themselves entangled in another battle, a lawsuit over the $250,000. Both Harvey Herford, Alicia's husband, and Marvin Bazemore, her son, had filed claims to the money. The legal fight became public, adding another layer of scrutiny to an already high-profile case. To the family, the cash was a lifeline, a piece of Alicia's legacy that could help them rebuild after an unimaginable loss. But to the public, it was another question mark in a case filled with them. Even as the family fought for answers, the clock was ticking. Kenya Jones's sentence of 8 years would be reduced by time served, leaving him eligible for release far sooner than anyone expected. For Alicia and Morgan's loved ones, the thought was unbearable. How could someone responsible for so much pain walk free in just a few short years? What message did that send to other families fighting for justice? The victim's family wasn't alone in their frustration. Across Norfolk, the case sparked debates about the effectiveness of the justice system, the role of plea deals, and the need for systemic reform. Activists called for the establishment of a witness protection program, arguing that no one should have to choose between safety and justice. Others pointed to the broader issue of gun violence, urging the community to address the root causes of the tragedy. But for all the debates and discussions, one truth remained. The story of Alicia Herford and Morgan Bazemore was far from over. It was a story of lives cut short, a family's fight for justice, and a city grappling with the weight of its own failures. And as new details continued to emerge, one question hung over it all. Would the full truth ever come to light? As the dust settled over the courtroom and the headlines began to fade, the pain for Alicia and Morgan's family only grew sharper. Every day without answers was a day filled with anguish, a relentless ache that no plea deal or court hearing could ever ease. But even as the family struggled to pick up the pieces, the echoes of this case continued to ripple through Norfolk. One of the most glaring aspects of the case was the role of fear. Witnesses had seen something, that much was clear. The dashcam footage showed people fleeing the scene, retreating into the shadows as gunshots shattered the night. But when investigators came knocking, doors remained closed. The silence was deafening. It wasn't just a matter of unwillingness, it was a matter of survival. Norfolk's rising gun violence had created an environment where speaking out often came with dire consequences. Without a formal witness protection program, those who dared to testify risked their own lives. It was a systemic flaw that had far-reaching consequences, not just for this case, but for countless others like it. For Alicia and Morgan's family, the silence was infuriating. Every uncooperative witness felt like another betrayal, another barrier to justice. But for the witnesses themselves, the decision to stay quiet wasn't easy. Many faced the impossible choice between safety and truth. knowing that one wrong move could put them or their loved ones in danger. This wasn't just a story about one family's loss, it was a story about a broken system. Even the legal battle over the $250,000 in cash was mired in systemic challenges. While the family fought to prove the money belonged to Alicia's estate, the city of Norfolk remained firm. A spokesperson for the police department stated that the funds would remain in custody until someone could prove rightful ownership. Yet even as the family provided documentation and testimony, the process dragged on, adding another layer of frustration to their already unbearable grief. The legal fight over the money also brought to light another uncomfortable reality: the assumptions people make about victims. Social media became a hotbed of speculation, with users questioning Alicia's character, her finances, and her involvement in the events leading up to her death. The presence of counterfeit bills only fueled the rumors, painting Alicia and Morgan in a light that their family adamantly refuted. "It's like they're being victimized all over again," said one family member in a public statement. "Alicia and Morgan didn't deserve this, not in life and certainly not in death." As the family wrestled with these public perceptions, another question lingered. What would happen to Kenya Jones once his sentence was over? The 8-year term, already reduced by time served, felt like a cruel joke to those who had lost so much. For Alicia and Morgan's family, the thought of Jones walking free was a nightmare that loomed closer with every passing day. Jones's behavior in the aftermath of the murders continued to raise eyebrows. His decision to turn himself in, while seemingly cooperative, was shrouded in ambiguity. Why had he come forward? Was it guilt, or had he been backed into a corner? And what about the inconsistencies in his account? Jones had offered little in the way of explanation, leaving investigators and the victim's family with more questions than answers. One of the most chilling aspects of this case was its lack of resolution. The plea deal ensured Jones would serve time, but it didn't provide the closure the family so desperately needed. Key details, like the role of the cash, the counterfeit bills, and the gun, remained unanswered, casting a shadow over the entire process. For Alicia and Morgan's family, it felt like the truth was slipping further and further away. Despite the challenges, the family refused to give up. They held vigils, rallied support, and demanded accountability from the legal system. They wanted more than just answers. They wanted change. The tragedy of Alicia and Morgan's deaths had revealed systemic flaws that couldn't be ignored. From the lack of a witness protection program to the disparities in sentencing, their case became a rallying cry for reform. But even as they fought for justice, the family was haunted by one lingering question. What if the full truth was never uncovered? What if the secrets behind the money, the motive, and the murders were buried forever? And what would it mean for the victims, two women whose lives had been so brutally cut short? As we near the conclusion of this case, the unanswered questions continue to pile up. Why did Kenya Jones act with such violence? Was it pure rage, jealousy, or something more calculated? What role did the $250,000 play, if any? And most haunting of all, was there more to this story than anyone was willing to admit? This case isn't just about two lives lost. It's about the cracks in a system meant to deliver justice, the fear that silences witnesses, and the families left to navigate a world without their loved ones. It's a story that forces us to ask hard questions, not just about what happened that night, but about the broader issues that made such a tragedy possible. Stay with us as we continue to unravel this complex and devastating case. The story of Alicia Hereford and Morgan Bazemore is far from over, and the truth, if it ever comes to light, may be more shocking than anyone could have imagined. The tragedy of Alicia Hereford and Morgan Bazemore's deaths left a void not just in their family, but in the entire Norfolk community. Their story wasn't just another headline, it became a symbol of broken systems, unanswered questions, and the fight for accountability in a world that often falls short. As the weeks turned into months, the case began to unravel further, revealing cracks that extended far beyond the crime itself. The legal battle over the $250,000 in cash became a central focus, but it wasn't the only unresolved issue. The counterfeit bills, the gun, and the lack of clarity around Kenyatta Jones' motives continued to haunt those who followed the case. Every piece of evidence seemed to whisper that there was more to this story than met the eye. The family, still reeling from their loss, faced the added burden of public scrutiny. Social media became a battlefield with theories and accusations flying in every direction. Some speculated that Alicia's rental properties had tied her to dangerous individuals, while others suggested that Morgan's relationship with Jones held the key to understanding the crime. Amid the noise, one thing was clear. The truth was slipping further from reach. Kenyatta Jones, the man at the center of it all, remained an enigma. His decision to turn himself in after the murders had raised eyebrows from the start. Why would a man capable of such violence willingly face the authorities? Was it guilt, or had he hoped to control the narrative before it spiraled out of his grasp? Even his plea deal left more questions than answers. Jones had confessed to voluntary manslaughter, a charge far less severe than the original counts of second-degree murder, but his confession lacked the one thing everyone wanted to know: why? What had driven him to such brutality? Was it a moment of rage, or had something far darker been at play? Investigators had combed through Jones's life, searching for clues. His relationship with Morgan had been tumultuous, marked by arguments and emotional highs and lows. Friends described their connection as passionate but unstable, a bond that seemed destined to erupt. But was that enough to explain what happened on March 12, 2021? Or was there a hidden trigger that no one had seen coming? As Bargy put it, then there was Alicia. By all accounts, she was a woman of integrity, a retired social worker who had dedicated her life to helping others. But her involvement in the events of that night raised troubling questions. Had she been caught in the crossfire of her daughter's relationship? Or was she targeted for reasons no one had yet uncovered? And what about the money? If it truly was her life savings, why had she kept it in her car, and why hadn't she told her family about the counterfeit bills hidden alongside it? The investigation, already fraught with challenges, hit a wall. Witnesses refused to cooperate, evidence remained circumstantial, and the questions surrounding the cash only deepened the mystery. For the family, it felt as though every step forward was met with 2 steps back, and as the months dragged on, their hope for closure began to waver. But the family refused to let Alicia and Morgan be forgotten. Vigils were held in their honor, drawing crowds of friends, neighbors, and strangers who had been touched by their story. Pink and purple balloons filled the sky, a poignant tribute to 2 lives taken far too soon. The events weren't just about mourning, they were a call to action. The family demanded answers, accountability, and systemic change. They wanted a world where no one would have to endure the pain they were experiencing. The community rallied behind them, but the systemic issues at the heart of the case remained unresolved. The lack of a witness protection program continued to hinder justice in Norfolk, leaving victims' families to bear the burden of a flawed system. The city's rising gun violence only added to the sense of unease, with many questioning whether more could have been done to prevent the tragedy. And then there was the looming question of Jones's release. His 8-year sentence, reduced by time served, felt like a ticking clock. For Alicia and Morgan's family, the thought of him walking free was a nightmare that refused to fade. Would his release bring new dangers? And would the unanswered questions surrounding the case ever find resolution? As we approach the end of this story, the unresolved mysteries remain as haunting as ever. Why did Kenya Jones target Alicia and Morgan? Was it pure rage, jealousy, or something more calculated? And how did the $250,000, the counterfeit bills, and the gun fit into the puzzle? These are questions that may never have definitive answers, leaving the family and the community grappling with the weight of what they've lost. But the story of Alicia Herford and Morgan Bazemore is more than just a tragedy. It's a reminder of the resilience of those left behind, the flaws in our systems, and the importance of fighting for justice even when the odds seem insurmountable. Their lives mattered, their story matters, and the fight for answers is far from over. As the fight for answers pressed on, one thing became clear. The story of Alicia Herford and Morgan Bazemore was not just a tragedy, but a wake-up call. It forced Norfolk, its justice system, and its community to confront uncomfortable truths. And while the questions surrounding the case seemed endless, the family's determination to find justice and honor their loved ones never wavered. The unanswered questions about the $250,000 and the counterfeit bills continued to fuel speculation. Every detail seemed to carry an unspoken weight. Why was the cash hidden in Alicia's car? Why would a woman known for her integrity and careful financial planning hold on to such a large sum in cash? And what about the counterfeit bills? Were they linked to a larger operation, or were they simply a red herring in an already convoluted case? Investigators were unable, or perhaps unwilling, to answer these questions definitively. For Alicia's family, this was another bitter blow. They maintained that the money was part of Alicia's life savings, the product of years of hard work and careful planning. But without proof, the mystery of the money remained unresolved, a haunting reminder of the gaps in the investigation. Meanwhile, Kenyatta Jones remained silent. Since his plea deal and sentencing, he had offered no further explanations. To the family, his silence felt like a cruel form of control, a refusal to give them the answers they so desperately needed. What was his motive? Was it rage, jealousy, or something even more sinister? And why had he turned himself in after committing such a heinous act? His decision to surrender seemed at odds with the brutality of his actions, leaving both investigators and the public baffled. As the family wrestled with these uncertainties, the broader implications of the case came into focus. Norfolk's struggles with gun violence, witness silence, and systemic failures were not unique, but they were deeply felt. This case was a microcosm of issues faced by communities across the country. How do you ensure justice in a system where witnesses are too afraid to speak out? How do you protect families from the ripple effects of violent crime? And how do you hold individuals accountable when the system itself feels so fractured? For Alicia and Morgan's loved ones, these questions were not theoretical, they were deeply personal. Every day without answers was a reminder of what they had lost. Not just two cherished family members, but also their sense of security and trust in the system meant to protect them. The community continued to rally around the family, holding vigils and events to honor Alicia and Morgan's memory. These gatherings weren't just about mourning, they were about resilience. They were about standing together in the face of injustice and demanding better. Pink and purple balloons, symbols of love and remembrance, filled the sky at every vigil. The family's pain was palpable, but so was their strength. They refused to let Alicia and Morgan's story fade into the background. But even as the family pushed forward, they were haunted by one looming reality: Kenyatta Jones's eventual release. With time served deducted from his 8-year sentence, his return to the outside world was not a distant possibility. It was an impending reality. What would his release mean for the family? Could they ever feel safe knowing the man responsible for their loved ones' deaths was free? The thought of Jones walking free was a bitter pill for the family and the community to swallow. It underscored the frustrations of a plea deal that many felt didn't reflect the gravity of the crime. But it also highlighted the broader issues of accountability and systemic reform. Was this case an isolated failure, or was it part of a larger pattern of injustice? And what could be done to ensure that no other family would have to endure the same heartbreak? As the years passed, the family remained steadfast in their quest for answers. They worked tirelessly to keep Alicia and Morgan's memory alive, sharing their story with anyone who would listen. For them, this wasn't just about justice, it was about legacy. Alicia and Morgan had touched so many lives, and their family wanted to ensure that their light wasn't extinguished by the darkness of their deaths. In the end, the case of Alicia Hereford and Morgan Bazemore is more than just a true crime story. It's a reflection of the complexities of justice, the resilience of those left behind, and the lingering impact of unanswered questions. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our systems, our communities, and ourselves. What do you think? Was justice truly served in this case? Or does this story reveal deeper flaws in the system meant to protect us all? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't stop here. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another true crime story. Together, we can continue to shine a light on the cases that demand our attention.